The Federal and Pedesta Hospital jointly present the Kanyakumari Marathon 2025. This event is co-presented by Rojavanam International School and Kingmakers IAS Academy. Run for Health on Sunday, May 4, 2025. Entry is free and all are welcome.
Hello and welcome to the Federal. Recently, the NCERT has come under scrutiny for its Class 7 social science textbook called Exploring Society, India and Beyond, which combines the subjects of history, geography, and civics. The book has reportedly removed all references to the Mughals and the Delhi Sultanate and introduces concepts such as sacred geography. The recently concluded Mahakumbh also finds a mention. While part 2 of the textbook is yet to come out, the first part has already raised eyebrows. To discuss these changes and understand their impact, we have with us Professor Anita Rampal. She's former Dean of Delhi University's Faculty of Education and former chairperson of the NCERT Primary Textbook Development Committees. Welcome to the Federal, Professor Anita.
Thank you.
So, I believe you've already gone through the social science textbook very thoroughly. What are your key takeaways from it?
I think it's a very deliberately motivated plan to, distort, delete, and erase things under social sciences. So, whether it's history, the way the period they have chosen, the themes and characters they have chosen, geography, how they look at it. I mean, they create bizarre ideas about, everything is sacred and Mother Earth is everything. So they deliberately obscuring concepts and ideas and understandings with myths, legends, stories. They don't even clarify when it's a story. What does it mean? I mean, is it a true story? Is it a... So it's deliberately done, and it's really, really very problematic.
Okay. You already mentioned this right now, but I wanted to talk specifically about the omission of the Mughals and the Delhi Sultanate, because this government seems to have a very special interest in medieval Indian history. So, how do you explain that? Because even during the COVID times, we saw that in the name of syllabus rationalization, they had removed, references to the Khiljis and Tughlaqs and other dynasties of that time.
Yes, actually, that's what I'm saying. What they've done is that they have chosen, which is not normally done in class 7. Class 7 is traditionally the time when you look at medieval history, even though there have been discussions earlier that, why do we divide this into ancient, medieval, modern? So historians have also relooked at that, but that doesn't mean that they've chosen cherry-picked. It's cherry-picking an area. It's cherry-picked 1900 BCE to 300 BC. I mean, what is the logic historically? Why do you do this? And they say, I mean, we don't know, but this is part 1, so we don't know what part 2 is going to be. But if this is the way cherry picking is being done, and this is the way completely problematic generalizations, they're trying to show that everything was continuous. I mean, from 2000 years earlier to now, and they use the word, you count and they use the word until today. From then onwards, it's a democracy from 2000 years. It's almost like a democracy. What does it mean? So you talk of a specific thing like sanghas, and within that, what was the way that might be called democratic? But that doesn't mean India. They call India all the time. They say, 2000 years back, it was so well networked all across the India. So it's deliberately actually make confusing young people and even older people about what is the history of the country, what happened after partition, when did a nation emerge as a nation in terms of administration, history, geography, political science. So it's just this very vague, nebulous, imaginary kind of a thing that is being presented to students, and that is going to be very damaging.
Right. So I wanted to ask you about this.
Yeah.
You as an educator, have you ever heard of this term, sacred geography? And what do you think of the references to the Mahakumbh and all these Char Dhams and all in a textbook of this kind?
I've just noted down how it's being used because that is also problematic. We can use these words, sacred groves, and which are there, how spiritually or religiously people think about it. But the idea behind this is, and they call it that sacred geography, because they're saying that all these different places, the country is networked by all these different sacred places. What is sacred is not really clear. They mention something, but they say that what has happened is that now, these sacred networks, which includes Char Dham, 12 Jyotirlingas, 51 Shaktipitas, why is that important? I mean, why is that only important when you're talking of geography? And they say that these networks cover the entire map of India. They crisscross India and they create a sacred geography. So it's very, very vague what this means. As a result, the land itself becomes sacred. So the whole land is sacred. So, you just extrapolate left and right, north and south, in whatever way you want, and you call the whole land is sacred. Similarly, the whole land becomes, similarly, they talk about a story of, the Shakti Peeth, and again, they call it a story. So, what is a story about the 51 Shakti Peeths and Shakti, the Divine Mother? Who is this Divine Mother? And you're talking to people of all religions, of all faiths in a country like ours, and you assume that it is the form of Shakti and her consort. I mean, these words are not understood by anyone. I mean, even adults don't use these words the way they use it in English. They were insulted by her father, and the symbol behind the story. So the story has been brought in, and the symbol behind it is clear. No questions. The whole land becomes the body of the Divine Mother. I mean, this is absurd. How are you talking about geography? Is this the way you talk about land? Is this the way you talk to students about what diverse sort of geographical landmarks and terrains and what we have in the country? And you just say, because the symbol of the story is that it becomes the body of the Divine Mother. So, I mean, are we trying to literally bring in these concepts which can remain in a realm of spirituality, but you're bringing it in the domain of history and geography, and you're confounding students deliberately? This is pseudoscience or pseudo history or pseudo geography.
Right. There were also reports that, right now you just mentioned that there are all these terms that nobody understands that they have mentioned in these books. But did you also find it to be kind of Sanskritized, in the sense that a lot of Sanskrit terms are used, and what do you have to say about that?
Yes, that is problematic because these books are read by children from all different languages. And especially in the English books, we saw that they've deliberately, it's an English textbook, and they've pushed in words in Hindi, they've pushed in words from Sanskrit. Here also, they'd spend about 4 pages trying to tell in class 6 and in class 7, how do you pronounce these terms? How do you use the diacritical marks to write these Sanskrit words in the Roman script? So this is, at this young age, what is the purpose of pushing this down a child's throat? And it doesn't make reading or comprehension any more easier. You're just, in any case, this is written in difficult English. So when you put in these Sanskritized words, which not all children will understand, just by calling it, that a tirtha rather than a spot or a place or a pilgrim spot. I mean, you're putting in so many words just for one word. All these different terminologies, you're deliberately confusing a child. So all they're going to be doing is memorizing. In any case, even now they just memorize these as facts. Now you're making that memorization all the more confounded. And look at this sacred ecology. Just look, the natural landscape is seen as sacred. So that is, just because different belief systems might have how you look at a mountain, and that's the beginning of how indigenous tribal beliefs have had. The perception has helped us protect and preserve nature. A very mischievous statement. Just because we perceive nature as sacred, we don't have to bother to preserve it. So on the one hand, NCERT had very deliberately removed the chapter on environmental degradation. It had completely removed it from the higher classes. They haven't yet reached that. Yes. So they've removed it. saying COVID, but they removed it. So you cannot talk about environmental degradation. A more serious thing is that in primary school, there is always a learning area called environmental studies. There are three learning areas: language, mathematics, and environmental studies, which is meant to be integration of science, social studies, and environment at the primary level, grade 3, 4, 5. That has been here for 3 decades or more. That's the way we teach it. They've removed that entire subject area. There is no environmental studies in the primary school, as the NCF says. And they've got a very weird thing called the world around us. What does that mean? There's no subject in the world that's called the world around us. So they call a subject, they create something. So, these are devious means of trying to circumvent something or erase something. You're erasing a whole subject called environmental studies. I won't go into the details, but the reasons they give are completely false in the NCF. They're very, very motivated and completely false reasons of why we are removing it, because teachers can't teach it. Science teachers can't teach social studies. Then why this big rhetoric about interdisciplinary and all that? The only interdisciplinary subject we had in our elementary school was environmental studies, when you brought together science and social studies, and that has been removed. So there is so much of complete deletion that is happening. There is a motivated deletion, and there are these mischievous attempts to try and say that because we believe, because nature is sacred, so this perception has helped us protect and preserve nature. This is there on page 173. Completely false and mischievous.
Yeah. So we've already spoken a little bit about the contents, but even as a structure, I wanted to know, they have combined three subjects: history, geography, and civics are now part of one textbook. So I wanted to know, do you think that's a good idea, and could it have any impact on learning?
See, for a long time, it's been a tradition and a convention and a policy in our country to do subjects in a more integrated way. So we do science, general science, up to class 8 or class 10 also. I mean, we're supposed to be doing social studies or social sciences. But it just happened last time after NCF that the three social sciences didn't come together in a very integrated, holistic way. So that's why they continued to have different textbooks, which ideally shouldn't have been there. I mean, ideally, we should, when we talk of, trying to think in an interdisciplinary manner, not to burden students very early with too many subjects, but take broad areas and then look at that in an integrated way. So like science looks at biology, chemistry, physics in an integrated way. I mean, they don't do it integrated. The chapters are different. The chapters are always physics and chemistry, but because that effort is not made. But that is what the whole world sort of seems to be moving towards, that have thematic areas, have interdisciplinary areas, don't really fragment disciplines. In fact, you transcend disciplinary boundaries by choosing a theme which crosses across, like you choose shelter or you choose food, and that crosses different boundaries. So you do a thematic study, and many countries are saying that we need to do that, because that forces the people who are developing these curricula and textbooks to think in an interdisciplinary way, which is not always very easy. It's easier said than done, but it's important. Right. It should be done. And, not make rigid boundaries between subjects, because when you're looking at the world, you're looking at things before you get into more specialization. So that should have been done. That's not, now it's been done, but it's not really done. It's again, you can choose certain chapters, 4 chapters on history and 4 chapters on geography. So again, the same thing. And civics was renamed in 2005 with a very clear understanding that civics brings a colonial connotation of being a subject. And, that's how you're supposed to read that subject as a subject. But it was called social and political life. So here again, there is no mention really, because it's brought into social studies.
Right.
And so I want to say that this entire thing of, as I said, taking a whole time period and saying, oh, it's all the same, it started then, it's the same till now. That and this whole business of sacred actually is deliberately trying to homogenize, assimilate different belief systems like the tribal belief system or the folk systems into Hinduism. So again, it's a majoritarian view. The lens is that. And this chapter on sacred, it begins with 4 religions which came from outside India. That's the first line. So, that is the agenda, to differentiate and distinguish between what came from outside India, because that helps the narrative of the BJP, and that who is the outsider, who is the insider, deliberately. You don't need to say it that they came. It's just one line, but that's the way you're projecting it. And then when you talk of the entire timeline, when you start that book, the timeline is all very smooth. It's just you're picking up. It's again from the Vedic period, the Buddhist, and these were schools of thought. So the late Vedic, Buddhist, Jain, there was no contestation, there was no conflict. Obviously, it's all very smooth, as if it flows from one from the other. So again, there's a homogenization. That's a very deliberate homogenization, because we know that Buddhism was a challenge to what was happening in Hinduism and in traditional conventional Hinduism. But that is not, the book doesn't even ever mention that these different religions or Sikhism, what happened. No, it's all a very smooth, like I said, from all these thousands of years, there's no question asked. And so there are no questions asked from students.
So also, this is part of the national curriculum framework of the national education policy. I wanted to know your views on the NEP, and whether you see these revision changes in this textbook as part of a larger sort of attack on education.
Yes, absolutely. Because when the NEP came, just then we had seen, what was in store, the way it was presenting things. One, when it spoke about values, I noted that immediately, that even if they spoke of a list of 25 values, they started with what is called protecting, they even had things like you protect public property and swachhata and sacrifice and all that. All these, what they called humanistic values. And right after 20 words will come the 4 values of the Constitution. So there was always this way of marginalizing, literally throwing out, putting it at the end, and bringing up these values, which kept changing, which may be questionable, maintaining cleanliness or preserving public property coming before liberty and fraternity and democracy is a very serious question. Who can think about it? And how can someone think like this? So the policy kept writing like that. I had raised it even then, that what is the agenda behind this? But the Constitution was marginalized. The right to education came only at one point in the introduction, just one word. Whenever a policy comes, it brings in a kind of acknowledgement of what are the aims and what has been achieved in the past and what has not been achieved and what are the new challenges. So that is always that's the preamble, that's a kind of a major beginning or introduction to a policy. This had nothing like that. So, and as I said, RT, just one mention, but after that, everything in the policy was violating the RT. So it said that schools can be closed, there can be mergers, because schools are not, low enrollment means it's a non-viable school, or it's not really, and that's what happened. It happened even before the policy came, from the programs of Niti Aayog. In 4 states or 5 states, they were shutting down thousands of schools. So we know what happens. Who is going to be impacted by this? The poor, the disadvantaged, those in remote areas where there are no schools. And so there was a clear indication that the government is withdrawing from education, withdrawing from its responsibility towards education. And it also said that 50% of students in school and 50% in colleges will be in vocational education. That again is a major withdrawal, because we know vocational education as it stands is a low status, low wage option. And why should you push children, especially in elementary school? It's pushing children, as the NCF says, right after primary school. And it has very, the way they reason it out is extremely problematic. They say that we're teaching children who go in a primary class, in class 3, if they go and talk to a shopkeeper or they talk to a farmer, they claim they are developing vocational, pre-vocational capacities. There's nothing, no word like this. In education, we never use such words. So they've concocted words, they've concocted theories which don't exist, which try to say that children's concepts develop only after age 11. Nothing like that is true. Children's concepts start developing before they speak. They speak because they have a certain concept of what is a four-legged being or what is flying, and they speak because they make concepts, on their own. But so all these things are very, very motivated, and they are completely they're malafide in a certain way because they are contrary to the basic right of a child. And then they said, a policy said that we are not going to put an emphasis, not going to focus on inputs. Can a country like India say we are not going to focus on inputs, and we'll have many philanthropic partners and all these private players who were called philanthropic partners, nice euphemisms, that they will come and telling them that we will only focus on outcomes. So we have been always opposing this notion of focus on learning outcomes, because these come as a denial of inputs. They say that we are not going to look at inputs. You look at outcomes as something's coming out of a child's head. You just take tests and more tests, and that is not learning. Because whether a child has not been given the right condition to learn, or the right teacher, or the right textbooks, what does it mean to give a test and then say we are only looking at outcomes? So that again shows the complete sort of withdrawal and the complete agenda of pushing children out, not abiding by their constitutional right, and also declaring that now the RTE has been amended just 4 months back, and it says that in class 5 and in class 8, if children do not get the pass marks, then after 2 months, they will be re-examined, and this never happens. Children are failed, but they never re-examined, and it says nice things. The teacher will provide all that support. These are vacations, no one bothers. And then they'll be re-examined, and then they'll be detailed. Then earlier, they had left it to states or union territories to decide. Now a centralized decision is taken. So the federal role of states in trying to set their educational agenda, including making their own curricula, and everything else has been completely contradicted through all these measures. There's a whole push for centralization, and these are some of the things that we are seeing. One thing that I want to add about the National Curriculum Framework, which is very, very disturbing, are the kinds of subject areas that have been given and the kinds of choices. They call it choice. So they try to please the middle class, which thinks that having more choice is good, but it's virtual, because the schools don't have those teachers, and but they've given a possibility of someone doing class 12 with very, very basic and questionable subjects. Like, you can do Indian knowledge traditions, and we've seen what goes under knowledge traditions when they can call this geography. And so you can do that, you can do 64 kalas, you can do anything like that. You can do one sports or yoga and one language and complete your higher secondary course. So then obviously you can't go into a traditional college with such courses. So it's like the gig economy. You have something in your hand, but you don't have it. So you don't know whether you can join a college after this or what you can do, but you let people think that they have finished their class 12. Similarly, for class 1 to 5, it's been dumbed down. It's called foundational literacy and numeracy. We always called it early language and mathematics and environmental studies. So there is, or something like that. So you dumb down something because, mostly the poor, the disadvantaged, the government schools will do that. Private will do what they want. They will use whatever textbooks they want. So it's again a highly stratified, highly unequal system that this was going to promote.
The Federal and Pedesta Hospital jointly present the Kanyakumari Marathon 2025. This event is co-presented by Rojavanam International School and Kingmakers IAS Academy. Run for Health on Sunday, May 4, 2025. Entry is free and all are welcome.